Hey guys, and welcome back to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel for another interview. I'm Connor, and joining me today is best-selling author Darren Shan to chat all about his career so far. We cover series such as the Saga of Darren Shan, the Demonata, Zom-B, and Archibald Lox, among others. If you enjoy this interview or others on the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. So welcome, Darren, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And like I was kind of saying to you before we start the recording, like interestingly enough, both of us were born in London, but we moved to Ireland at a young age. And how did your upbringing over there kind of affect your development as a writer?
Well, I wanted to be a writer even before I came back. I was very young when I moved back to Ireland. I was only 6. But even then, I loved telling stories and making things up, telling them to my friends and my mum, and even writing a few for school. So I think I would have been a writer no matter what. But yeah, a lot of Ireland works into my books. I've set some of my books here, and there are certain sayings which I would pick up. Yeah, being in Ireland, sometimes my editors have to correct me and say no one else is going to know what those mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I feel like even though some of your books are kind of vague about where they're supposed to be, I think if you kind of know Ireland and know the kind of sayings people use, you can kind of pick up on it. I know that's where people suspect some of your characters in Cirque Du Freak are from, just because of the way they kind of speak or certain things you mention, right? I mean, obviously you kind of keep that deliberately vague about where it's meant to be, but there's definitely a very Irishy feel about it, I think.
It definitely feeds in. Like Cirque Du Freak isn't set anywhere specific.
Yeah.
In my head, it was a mixture of places from both Limerick, which is where I live, and London, which is where I was born and still feel very close to. So it was a sort of amalgamation of those two worlds. The theatre in Cirque Du Freak was based in this old movie theatre that I used to go to in Limerick, which was later turned into a nightclub. It's been derelict for a long time now. So that was a sort of, now at the same time, there was also parts of it taken from another movie theatre over in London called the Scala.
Yeah.
So yeah, I create these worlds inside my head, which are a mishmash of places that I know in the real world.
Yeah.
So even though the town Cirque Du Freak isn't a real town anywhere, it's inspired by real towns, of which Limerick was a big inspiration.
Yeah, and I know like many of your books, especially your YA books, kind of use a distinct like first-person narration style, and even kind of your conceit with Cirque Du Freak is that it's a real story that someone is telling, right? And I suppose, like, how do you kind of find writing your characters from that perspective? And do you believe the stories would be kind of, I guess, written differently or told differently if you hadn't done that?
Yeah, I mean, I've written from the third person as well. I've written lots of books, but for adults as well as YA. I say most of the as you say, most of the YA ones have been first person. I just go with what feels right for a story. With Lord Loss, the first book of my Demonata series, I actually started writing that in third person, and after a few pages, it just didn't feel right to me. I had planned to do it in third person, but it didn't feel right. It didn't give me the immediacy and the intimacy that I wanted. There are limits to both, no matter what approach you take. There are pros and cons. Right in the first person, it does tie you to what that one person sees, so you can't really explaining what's happening in other parts of the world that you might set your story in. That gives you a real sense of being in the moment, which I like. I like stepping into the character's shoes and being there with them. And we just seem to like that too. It does. It has a huge impact on how the story unfolds and how it goes on, and what you do with the story and how you choose to tell the story. I like it. It's something that it's felt right for most of my series. And so that's what I don't overthink these things. If it feels right, I tend to go with it.
Yeah, because I've been a fan of the Demonata for a while as well, and I could be misremembering, but didn't you kind of say that the need for like more narrators was because you didn't think you could tell the whole story with just grubs? Was that, or am I kind of mixing that up or something? You needed kind of other perspectives to help tell the story.
Well, when I wrote Lord Loss, I intended it to be a one-off story.
Okay,
I hadn't to write more about demons. The second book I wrote was actually Beck, which ended up being the fourth book published. Then I think I wrote what became book 5 and 6. And then I wrote book 3. It came in a very wrong way. I wasn't sure if I could tie different strands together, if I could weave the story of Beck in with the story of Grubbs. So at one point, I could consider just telling Grubbs' story. But I felt it wasn't right. There wasn't enough there. It would have just been, you know, Grubbs versus Demons every book, and I just felt I felt I was missing something. And it was only when I wrote Demon Thief, which was the second book published, but the sixth book in the series I actually wrote. But I saw how it all worked. Suddenly something clicked, and it all came together. I went back and rewrote and restructured the other 5 books. It was like putting a jigsaw puzzle into place. And book 6 allowed me, what became book 2, allowed me to do that and to piece it all together. I think it was definitely needed for 3 narrators to work the way I wanted it to work, to tell the big overall story that I wanted to tell. It just took it beyond the story about this teenager who runs into a demon into being something much more epic. And I've always liked the epic in my stories. I like to aim high and shoot for the moon and see how far I get.
I mean, it's definitely interesting from what you're saying. I know you didn't intend this, but if someone just randomly picked up one of the books just in a library or a bookstore, and even if it wasn't the first one that was published, they could still kind of piece it together if they read it in a different order, which, you know, is not all series can say that's possible, but kind of works out that way.
I try as much as possible to make each book work on its own terms. Now, it's hard when you do a big long series, because obviously you get 7, 8, 9, 10 books into a series. You know, there's a lot that a newcomer is going to miss out on. I always try to provide enough detail that someone coming in on book 10 or 11, because I know they do. You know, I've spoken to the readers, and, you know, book 12, Saga of Sons of Destiny, was the first book they read in my vampire series. Or Heroes in the Demonata. And so I always try to put in just enough details that will allow it to work for someone who's new to it. I don't overload it, because I don't want to make it boring for those who follow me all the way. Sometimes I know if you've been reading a series for several years and have followed it from book 1 onwards, you're going, why is he telling me that? I know that. He said that in book 2. He said that in book 4. So it's just finding a few little rocks on which you can allow readers who are unfamiliar with the books before to still be able to read and enjoy this particular story. It's always a challenge, and each series is different. In some series, it's easier to do than in others. With Demonata, because there was 3 narrators, you know, you could read book 4 Beck's story without having read book 3, and it would make no difference whatsoever. It was set 100 years before the events of the first 2. But yeah, it's one of those tricky things when you're doing a series. You know, how much do you include for new readers? Not too much, because you've got to respect the existing readers first and foremost. But yeah, you do know you're going to pick up readers along the way, and I think it's nice if they're not thrown in completely at the deep end.
And actually something that's kind of almost a hallmark in your series as well is that you kind of like plot twists, or like kind of surprising people. And personally, and I'm not just saying this because of who I'm talking to, but one of the ones in your books are probably, you know, one of my favorite twists of anything, you know, I've read, which is involves a certain Harkat molds and who he was way, you know, back in the past. And also, like, considering, and again, if anyone listening is like not gotten that far, you know, spoiler, but because it was an anagram, you had to have planned that when you first created the other character involved. So like, would you say then your writing style is more methodical than just kind of realizing later, or actually, hang on a second, if Harkat used to be this guy, that could be interesting. You know, you kind of, are you more like, you know, thinking ahead than kind of coming to that in the moment? That makes sense.
Well, the way I write is unusual. I'll usually be almost finished a series, or sometimes even finished the first draft of the last book before the first book gets published. So often what I will do is I'll get ideas from later books, and then when I'm rewriting and editing the first few books before they get published, I change those.
Got it.
Harkat's actually originally going to have been a different character.
Okay.
And his name was actually Harvey.
Right.
But then when I got halfway through the series, I realised the character I'd meant him to be, it didn't work. It wasn't.
Evra, does that make Harvey? Evra, does that be?
Evra, it was going to have been Evra. Because I had planned for Evra to go to Vampire Mountain with Darren. Evra was supposed to be much more of a storyline than he was. But when I came to write book 4, there was absolutely no reason for Evra to go there. I would have extended him there purely just as a plot device. And obviously you have to do plot devices as a writer. Sometimes you have to move your characters into situations where you want them to be. Because it works for the story. But as much as possible, you shouldn't push it too far. You shouldn't make things, you shouldn't throw characters in there who wouldn't logically be there. So when I came to write book 4, I realised that, well, Everett's not going to go to Vampire Mountain, and so
No.
he's not going to be in the next 3 books. So then the question then became, well, why would he become Harkat Mulls? Or the little person, why would he align himself with Darren so closely?
Yeah.
And I realised it didn't work with that. So what character could it be?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've written book 6, it was after I'd written book 6, I realised actually who it should be and who it needed to be. Someone who needed to atone, who was looking to help Darren, who was looking to help the vampires. And the answer became obvious at that point. So the way I write, I say it's a bit unusual. Most writers will do one book, finish it, publish it, move along. I'm sort of bouncing back and forth between them quite a lot. So I'm able to incorporate ideas from later further on in the storyline and tie it all together much more neatly. So it makes me seem as if I've looked ahead, like with a crystal ball. But the answer is, I'm like Mr. Tiny. I haven't seen the present. I have to go back, tinker with the past.
I was just kind of picturing you with like a piece of paper and one of the names, trying to make another name out of it to try and get the anagram. But I mean, because I was thinking that that'd have to be hard work to try and make that right. But yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah.
Well, I had the name of the character because I've written the books. I had the name of the character. Yeah. When I looked at the name and I tweaked the letters around, and Harkat Mulls came out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, like these kind of long-running young adult series have been almost your bread and butter, mostly, I think, over the past maybe 20 odd years. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
And I would say then, out of like all these worlds that you've created, like, would you say you've got a favorite to write about? And if you had to like revisit one, creatively speaking, like what would you be most compelled to go back to?
I don't really have a favourite. Yeah, my most popular has been the vampire series. By far, that's the one. Cirque Du Freak tends to be the book that the vast majority of my readers start with, and the vampire series is the one that has had the longest legs. The one I'm most not admiring of, the one that probably means the most to me is Demonata, because it was the most challenging. And the way it came together, the way the structure didn't reveal itself until I was halfway through the series. And it was a long time on that when I thought it wasn't going to work, or that I was going to have to truncate it and just write a few books about this Scrubs Grady character. It was crazily ambitious, and I really pushed the boat of what I could do with that. And for a long time I thought I wouldn't be able to do it. And when it did all come together and it all clicked, I look back at it now and it's almost impossible to remember how it all worked and how I did it. If I was planning that today, I think I'd run a mile, having the ideas were explored. So it's my most ambitious and crazy series. And so for those reasons, I don't have a favourite series, but that's one that probably means a bit more to me than the others, just because it really was a stretch to try and put it all together and make it work. And the fact that it did work so well, it was just, I got a real buzz out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose as well that kind of by nature of the topic you're writing about, or topics, kind of gory, kind of, adventurous. There's been a lot of deaths, sadly, of characters, some of whom, maybe more beloved than others. And like, would you say anyone in particular has gotten the most? Like, people who might meet you kind of say, "Oh, why did you kill this character?" Like, would you say that anyone in particular has gotten more of that than others?
Yeah, well, by a long way, it's Mr. Crepsley. It's a spoiler for those who haven't read it, but it's 20 years ago, so most people have read book 9 of the saga. I still think the one who really left a big hole for a lot of readers. He was a really important character, and I knew that when I was writing it. I knew that he meant a lot to me, and I knew it was going to be painful. But it all goes back to the prologue of Cirque Du Freak. You can look at everything I've written in light of that prologue. In that prologue, I say it's a true story, and I always treat my books as if they're a true story. And I say, in the real world, bad things sometimes happen. Good guys sometimes die. And I've always taken an approach. When I write a series, I don't protect characters. Obviously, you've got to have enough of them around to get the reader to the end of the story. You can't kill everyone off in the first book. And let them go on with. But I do let my important characters die. I don't wrap them in cotton wool. And because I know a character is popular, I don't save him from a death if death is what the story demands. At the same time, I don't go looking to kill off the characters. With the new Archibald Lox series, I thought all the main characters were going to make it to the end. I wanted to write a series where they all got to the end intact. When I got to the later books, I realised that isn't actually going to happen. A few are going to fall a long way, because that's what the story demanded. And I always go with the demands of the story. The story to me is the real boss. I'm the facilitator for it. But if a good story is working well, it takes on a life of its own. And as a writer, you learn to follow the story rather than impose your will on it at every single junction.
Yeah, I mean, just personally for me speaking, if I like met you in the context of like a fan and like kind of saying about deaths, I mean, I don't know if it's like an obvious one that people would say, but the one I was most shocked by when I first read it was Shankus, Everest's son.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
Shankus,
mean,
yeah.
just because that was just a little child, and I mean,
Yeah.
that was the one that shocked me. Obviously, not as much emotional investment into him, but just the kind of that you would go there was what surprised me.
I don't think anyone expected that, but normally the children are safe. But as I say, in my world, even the
No one's
kiddies.
safe. Yeah, and I suppose about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago in 2009, you kind of joined a select group of writers having their work adapted for the big screen with maybe, shall we say, the polarizing Cirque Du Freak, The Vampire's Assistant, obviously John C. Reilly and Josh Hutcherson, Willem Dafoe. And like, what do you think you most enjoyed about that film and like the experience of having your work adapted in that way?
I like it on its own terms. I'm always open to work being adapted. I love books, obviously, but I also love movies and TV. And they're different mediums and stories work in different ways. My approach has always been to allow my works to be adapted if somebody wants to come along to adapt them, but to stand quite far back from the process, unless they really want to involve me. I've read lots of interviews with other writers who tried to get involved, who tried to exert control, and you just can't as a writer. Sometimes they will respect your viewpoint, sometimes they will look for your opinion and will actually try to incorporate it in, but usually, but they do their own thing. And sometimes it works. A lot of the time it doesn't. Very few adaptations genuinely work, but it's always work. It's a gamble. It's worth taking. And even when it doesn't work brilliantly, even when it's not the most faithful adaptation, as a Cirque Du Freak movie certainly wasn't, it does bring your work to new audiences. I picked up a lot of new readers on the back of the film who'd never heard of me, never heard of Cirque Du Freak. They went to see it at the cinema. They liked it enough to get interested in the story. They picked up the books and they started reading. And 10, 12 years later, they're still here as big fans. I know people who've read. I always say it's a Cirque Du Freak film, like many film adaptations, it's really better appreciated if you're completely unfamiliar with the work. If you taste of what my world is like. I mean, if you come to the books, you discover the full story. You go around and read the books first, and then go to the film. Your reaction is going to be, well, they cut out this character, they changed that story, they meshed this up. Obviously, I would have liked it to be more faithful, and I think it would have worked better if it had been more faithful. I think it might have a chance at the box office, but on its own terms and its own film, I think it's a nice little film. I've spoken to lots of people who did enjoy it. Now, some of them say after reading the books, they don't enjoy it as much because they found so much more in it. But on its own terms, if you've never read a word of my works, it's a really quirky, unusual little film, and it's got a small cult following. It's playing on. It's still showing. It's playing on Amazon Prime at the moment. It was on IMDb TV just before that. It's been on Netflix. It's still, even though it's 12 years later, it's still finding a little audience all the time. And it's never been huge, because it's a quirky, odd little film. But it's one of those ones which I don't think it's as bad as some of the fans of the books claim it is. I think any adaptation is going to meet with a cold reaction from people who love books. The great thing about books is they're a personal experience. Every reader brings a book to life in their own way, inside their own imagination. When you go and see a film, everyone's seeing the same things. And films, it's very, very hard for a movie to match what's inside any one reader's head. So no, on its own terms, I like it, but it's not it was never my film. I don't take any of the blame for it. Similarly, things it does well, I don't take much of the glory either. The filmmakers made it. They weren't interested in having me involved. That was fine. I stayed out of it. It is. I like it for what it is, but I do respect the opinion of Shansters, fans of my books, who don't like it so much.
I mean, I think it is all about perspective, because I think even if it hadn't been labeled as being an adaptation of your books, it could have easily been a standalone story. Just if you change details around and not said it was based on your books, it still would have worked as a film, I think. And I think it's also a testament, though, to your books and to your work that people want it to be as faithful as possible, because you put the effort and you put in the work to kind of make this really beautiful, complex storyline, and it was just a shame they couldn't carry it over as well as you've written it. But
hopefully it'll get rebooted one day.
Maybe
more likely for TV, I think, if it does. And we might see a more faithful adaptation down the line. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously you kind of mentioned it a bit earlier, but your new Archibald Lox series, and I would think after already having like all these long-running, like obviously with the vampires, the demons, the zombies, kind of trying to find new ideas and like what inspired you to create this new world and these new characters.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actively look for series ideas. Series takes several years of my life. They're big work. Each time I do one, I think, that's probably going to be it. I'll never do something this mammoth again.
Yeah,
it's very rare. If you look at other writers, like someone like Neil Gaiman, for Sandman was his big graphic novel collection. Apart from that, it's been individual books, standalone stories. Alan Moore's unusual. He wrote several long series.
Yeah,
but it is very odd to find yourself working on something that long and to have more than one of those. Very few writers have even one of those in them, and to find you've got 3 or 4 of them, it's very unusual. But I keep getting drawn back, and each time I think it's the last time. When I was working on Zom-B, I was sure with Zom-B, it's 12 books. I thought that's it now.
Yeah,
I'm sort of focused now on one-off stories and standalone tales. But then I was walking across a bridge in London, and I saw a girl walk towards me. She was pulling these strange faces, and I wondered why she's doing that. And something inside me went, oh well, she's trying to open a doorway to another universe.
Yeah,
and I was off again on another multi-book adventure. Not quite as long, but this one's going to be 9 books in total. So it's not quite as long as the Saga or the Zom-B or Demonata, but pretty close.
Yeah, but just as a matter of interest though, because the way you set up Cirque Du Freak, was kind of your perspective on that different because you knew it had to have a natural end somewhere. This was someone recounting, as opposed to like the others. It was just kind of almost in the moment. But if that one was like almost like a diary, and that you knew it had to come to a natural end at some point, would that ever occur to you when you were writing it?
I had the idea for what would be the finish fairly early on. I sort of saw roughly the way I could make it work as a true story, which would explain how it could have happened, and yet how I could be writing other books as a normal human.
Yeah.
So I did see that quite early on, but there was a lot in between those 2 poles that was completely unknown to me. I wrote it actually, even with Cirque Du Freak. I knew there was the room to write more books, but I wasn't sure I would. When I wrote book 1, it was the first time I'd ever written for children. I didn't know if it would sell. I didn't know if I'd be any good at it. I didn't know if I enjoyed it. So for me, it was a standalone book. Cirque Du Freak, if it only been 1 book, the ending of Cirque Du Freak, I was quite pleased with how it finished. Walk off into the sunset, the boy and the vampire. That could have been a very, very nice finish to a story.
Yeah.
I felt compelled to go on and continue. And I knew if I did go on, I had a rough idea of where I wanted to get to, which could bring it all back to that starting point and explain how it all happened. Sometimes that will be the case with me with books. I'll know the ending very, very early on. Sometimes it's the first thing I'll know. And then it's working out how do I get to that point and how can I create a storyline which will build up and bring me to this point that I want to get to.
Yeah. Wait, so then was it you like naming the character Darren that kind of made you have the idea of it being a true story, or like the reverse where you decided to be a true story and then it has to be called Darren because that's my name?
No, I knew I was going to start it by saying it was all a true story. I just wanted to use that as a little gimmick just to make it to immediately capture the which is all true. But then I knew I wasn't going to really, because I've written books for adults as well, and I'd sold my first adult book, which was released under my real name, Darren Shan.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was going to use a different name. And so I was thinking about names I could use as an author. And my grandfather was called Paddy Shan. It was Paddy O'Shaughnessy, but Shan is a very common nickname for O'Shaughnessy in this island, because you can also pronounce it O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
And I just thought if I wrote the book under the name of Darren Shan, that'd be a nice tip of my hat to my dead grandfather.
Got it.
And then I thought, well, why not use? I'm saying it's a little true story. It's not my real name, so why not use it for the character as well? And it just felt good, so I went with it.
Yeah, and I know you were saying earlier you don't like really pick favorites, so like I'll try not to ask this question that way, but like with Archibald Lox, like where would you kind of say he how would he compare to like your other protagonists, obviously the likes of Darren Shan or Grubbs or E. Smith, kind of differences, or like how's he similar to them?
Archie's probably most like Darren.
Right.
If you compare it to someone like Grubbs or B. Smith, he's much more placid.
Yeah.
He's more inclined to go along with things. He's a very interesting character. We don't really get a full handle on him until the last book in the series. It's one of these mysteries I throw up very early on. Archie, to all intents and purposes, is a very, very ordinary boy just living on Earth. But then he discovers he has this power to open locks and to cross universes into this universal merge. And he doesn't know why he has that power, and no one else knows why he has the power. And that's the sort of question that is the main storyline of the series, which you'll become. There are story arcs within it, but the overall storyline is asking, well, what's the deal with Archie? How does he have these powers? Why is he such a good locksmith? And that will be slowly answered by the time we get to book 9. He's an interesting character. He's a nice character. He's definitely after B. Smith, because B. Smith was very abrasive.
Sure,
From a point of view as someone who came with a lot of emotional baggage. B's one of my most fascinating characters. I loved writing those storylines. But it was nice with Archie just to go someone who's nice. Archie, everyone sort of likes Archie. At the same time, as we go along, we start to see or start to suspect there's much, much more to Archie than what we first see. And, what exactly is going on there? And is he going to be the hero? Could he be a villain of the piece? We're only going to find out as we go forward.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, generally speaking, obviously, as you've written more and more books, you'd have more like name recognitions. I think there'd be like a similar target audience. That makes sense. And obviously, if you've got the kind of same or similar people in mind when you're writing your books, like, how would you decide? Because I think personally, that scene in Lord Loss, again, well, it's the first book, but spoilers for anyone, where Paul Grubbs finds out what happens to his family really early on, and that's one of like the rare times for me where I've kind of been like actively thinking about a horrific scene after I've encountered it, because I'm the kind of guy that could watch a horror film and not flinch because I know it's not real. But that was one of the rare times it kind of got to me. So like, how would kind of like you say then you would decide, when it should be kind of more out there, or maybe when to tone it back?
It's just a gut decision.
Yeah.
I try not to think of the audience too much.
Yeah.
I try to imagine myself when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years of age. I try to remember what I used to enjoy reading and watching. I try and recall what was too much for me. I'm reading Cujo. I read Salem's Lot when I was very young and loved that. And I read Cujo, and that was too adult. It was dark. It took me into places where I felt uncomfortable. So it's just trying to think back to what I would have enjoyed reading. And I try to just use common sense to draw the line. And I do draw the line. I'm always very, very conscious of not taking my YA books too grisly, of not going into certain areas with them. But at the same time, kids love horror. So many adults do. I think what I want to do, Cirque Du Freak, going back to what I saw, was a way to bridge the world between child's horror and adult horror.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, there were no horror books written for children. Then when I was older, you started to get series like Goosebumps. And Point. But they were still very, very fell very short of the darkness of a Stephen King novel. So what I wanted to do was something that would act as a bridge. Somebody who would read Goosebumps, but who was too young to go into Stephen King, would have something that would give them more darkness.
A bridge.
That would work in different ways. That would challenge them more than something like Goosebumps would. And it would take them on a journey into horror. Because I've always loved horror. It's been my favourite genre since I was a very young child. So, but it's just a gut call. And I do a lot of editing. I do a lot of rewriting. I do tone things down. It might always seem like that, given how grisly they are in the books. But there was a book in Zom-B Bride in the Zom-B series, which was I cut a lot out of that. There was a lot more in that. It was just this torture scene, and I pared it down and pared it down. So it had to be there, but I pared it back as much as I could. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just making that call and hoping you call it right.
Yeah, and I know kind of on your website you've got a lot of writing tips for any people who want to, obviously try and pursue a career as a writer themselves. And obviously, I've looked at them myself. It's very extensive. But what do you think, to kind of look at it differently, people should be more aware of before committing to that decision? Is there any kind of, because I think people might, think it's like a glamorous kind of career because you kind of just get to use your imagination and come up with all this stuff. But obviously, it's very competitive and might not always be the most like fruitful financially. So like, do you think there's anything people should be aware of, or like maybe, I don't know, is peril the right word? But maybe like before kind of like going head first and
No, but if you're looking for a financial career move, being a writer is crazy because very, very few writers make any money out of it. It's very hard to get established, very hard to stay established. There are so many authors out there. You've got to do it because you love it. You do it because you've compelled. I just love writing. I got very, very lucky. One of my stories took off, Cirque Du Freak.
Yeah.
And I enjoy these great financial benefits from it. But I always do it because I like it, because I enjoy it. And that's got to be your approach. You write because you want to write, because if you have to write, if you get lucky and it sells loads of copies, that's brilliant. That's a bonus. And it's a great bonus.
Yeah.
I don't think your goal. I think your aim should be to write the best stories you can, develop your talent as much as you can, and write stories that you can be proud of. You can spend a lot of time locked away in the room by yourself, just you and your imagination. So, I think if you try and chase the market and write, let's say write vampire stories because you think, oh, vampire stories going to sell.
Yeah.
And just end up frustrated with books that probably don't sell, wishing you'd done the thing you want to do. So yeah, go with your heart. So it might sound corny. That'd be my advice. Hope a demon doesn't rip it out before you get there.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously more than 20 years after the first Cirque Du Freak came out, what do you hope people who might be still reading it now kind of take away from it or from your other series?
I just hope they enjoy the stories.
Yeah,
that's what you do. Is when you write a story, you just always hope that people will enjoy the characters, enjoy the storylines, will be taken by surprise, will maybe feel compelled to come back and reread them, and will hopefully pass them on. That's the great thing about children's books. We do tend to get passed on, from older brothers and sisters to younger brothers and sisters to friends to neighbours to cousins. There are copies of Cirque Du Freak for 20 years that might have gone through 5, 6, 7, 10 different hands, 10 different readers. And it's a lovely, lovely thing to think that stories can do that.
Yeah, and this is actually the last question I've got here to ask you. And apologies in advance for kind of throwing it at you at the very end. But looking ahead to the rest of, the little bit of 2021 that's left, what do you hope to accomplish professionally or personally, or maybe even into 2022, just because there's not much left for this year?
Yeah, everything at the moment. I'm working on editing the last few books of Archibald Lox. So I released books 4, 5, and 6 over the course of this summer, and 7, 8, and 9 will be coming out in 2022. So actually, before this interview, I was just edited the end of book 7, and I'm into the first few chapters of book 8.
Right.
Book 7 ends, and it's one of my big, huge cliffhangers. 7 and 8 both huge cliffhangers, so I'm enjoying those, and hopefully fans will do. Yeah, that's my sort of big moment. Get those out next year, and then we'll see what's next.
Well, I guess, Darren, best of luck with Archibald Lox and with your continued success going forward. Well, all the best, and take care and stay safe.
Thanks a lot, Connor. Cheers.